to an accident, the boy unfortunately rushed into the mysterious world of the Griffin. In ancient legends, this world is a forbidden place created by gods and demons together, where there are hidden forces capable of subverting all world order, as well as terrifying creatures that make people tremble with fear. Now the boy's real world is facing an unprecedented great crisis. Monsters from the Black Tower are stirring restlessly, attempting to invade the human world. The boy has been chosen by mysterious power to undertake the mission of changing his fate. The gears of fate begin to turn quietly. Thus, an exhilarating adventure begins. Meanwhile, in another part of the real world, a disgusting bug suddenly appeared on the woman's belly. The next second, the worms leap up and crawl into her mouth. Panicking, she can only desperately clutch her neck, fearing the worms would crawl into her stomach and bring unpredictable consequences. In her panic, she finally finds a pair of pliers. With all her strength, she managed to pull the worms out. At this moment, an ominous premonition washes over her. Little does she know, this will be a terrifying beginning of a disaster. Even more horrifying events are yet to come. The boy in front of her is named Mark. He was just about to sneak a bite of chocolate cake. At this moment, a strange noise suddenly comes from behind him. He slowly edges closer to the wall. Unexpectedly, a terrifying roar echoes from within the wall. At this moment, Mark's father suddenly rushed into the room and smashed the animal statue on the table. Immediately after, he took out the chronicle of the family's secret history from a hidden compartment and handed it over to his eldest son Beta for safekeeping. But they have no idea that the shattered porcelain frog has come to life. The father hurriedly leads his two sons to escape. The three of them quickly get into the car, ready to leave. However, just as they set off, the wife pet suddenly appeared to block their path. She claims that all of this is a figment of their imagination, and that there are no monsters chasing them at all. But the father ignores his wife's objections and slams the steering wheel to accelerate away. Looking at the terrified face of Mark, the father turns around and softly reassures him. But unexpectedly, flames suddenly shoot out from his head. This scene from years ago suddenly woke Mark from his dreams. Time passed quickly. It turned out that it was now 10 years later, and today happened to be Mark's 16th birthday. His mother was curled up on the sofa, snoring evenly. Mark slowly walked over and picked up a blanket nearby. He carefully covered his mother with it. Then he turned and went to where the birthday gifts were placed. With eager anticipation, he unwrapped the package. When he saw that it was the headphones he had always wanted, Mark's eyes instantly lit up. He eagerly put on the headphones and rode his bike towards the school. On that day, a new student named Lisa joined the class. The moment Mark saw her, it was as if he had been enchanted, falling in love at first sight. But he knew in his heart that love took time step by step. Finally, the school bell rang for the end of class. Beta came to the school to pick up Mark after class, due to a somewhat tense relationship with their mother. After Beta reached adulthood, he ran her own record store and lived an independent life. After returning to the record store, he took Mark straight into the office and opened a hidden safe in the wall. Inside was a carefully prepared gift for Mark. When Mark opened it, he found a thick chronicle. It turned out this was a family tradition for many years. Every boy in the family who turned 16 would receive such a chronicle. They were required to solemnly sign their name on it to initiate their contact with the mysterious world of the Black Tower. However, Mark remained skeptical about the Black Tower world, and thus was quite resistant to the book. Noticing his brother's unusual emotions, Beta wasn't angry. He gently encouraged him to sign his name. While speaking, he handed the pen to Mark. Mark didn't hesitate for long. He swiftly and decisively wrote his name. But just as the pen tip touched the chronicle, a strong wave of dizziness washed over him like a tide. After returning home, Mark and his mother had dinner together, and then returned to the room, turning on the record player and playing his favorite music. But the chronicle next to him seemed to have a magical pull, constantly drawing Mark's attention. Driven by curiosity, he slowly opened the ancient book and discovered it contained records of various strange creatures. Mark learned from the book that the Black Tower world had 4 levels, namely the lowest level, Mateng, the swamp layer, and the sky layer. Additionally, there were stone demons carved on the stone pillars and slave hunters with a pair of goat horns. But strangely, half of the back of the book was actually blank. In the last compartment, there was a map of the Black Tower world. As Mark flipped through it, he felt his mind to become chaotic. He helplessly closed the book. Unexpectedly, just as he stood up, the surrounding scene suddenly transformed. When he came to his senses, he found himself in the mysterious Black Tower world. In the distance, faint footsteps could be heard. Nervous, Mark quickly hid in the shadows. He saw a strange creature with goat horns slowly approaching. It was chewing on something it held in its hands. Mark was so frightened that he could only hide and watch secretly. At the same time, he carefully backed away. But fate seemed to enjoy playing tricks on him. He accidentally triggered a hidden mechanism. The creature suddenly turned its head upon hearing the noise. Its eyes flashed with menace as it rushed toward him. Mark's face went pale in an instant. He felt as if his heart was about to burst out of his chest. Mark couldn't think of anything else and turned to run desperately. However, in his panic, he suddenly lifted his feet off the ground and fell into a trap filled with human bones. Before he could struggle to climb out, the creature was already at the edge of the pit. After a series of roars from the creature, it raised the axe high and swung it toward Mark. At this critical moment, Mark woke up from extreme fear. He found himself lying in his bedroom. It was as if all the terrifying experiences were just a vivid nightmare. For the rest of the day, Mark felt lost and restless, as if his soul had been taken. He then sought out a psychologist named Loff and told him about his recent bizarre experiences. After listening, Loft told Mark that it was just his longing for his father that had caused him to hallucinate. After hearing the doctor's words, Mark rushed to the record store and aggressively inquired with Beta, throwing back the Chronicle and determined to forget the so-called illusions from last night. Just then, a customer walked into the usually quiet record store. Mark focused his gaze and saw it was Lisa, the new girl from his class. He cleared his throat and stepped forward to greet her. To his surprise, after chatting, they discovered that they both had an interest in music. They hit it off and decided to go out for a stroll. Unexpectedly, Mark led her to the rooftop. Thus, two children were grilling meat on the rooftop. They chatted happily. Before they knew it, night fell, and the stars filled the sky. Just as the atmosphere was perfect, it seemed they were about to take their relationship further. Suddenly, Mark's watch beeped a reminder. It was time for him to return home. Before leaving, Mark gave Lisa a tape. After returning home, he saw his mother happily chatting with Beta. Such scenes had not happened in a long time. Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of comfort. He felt a warm atmosphere filling the room. However, this warmth quickly disappeared. His mother suddenly changed the subject and expressed dissatisfaction with Beta's career. She still felt sad about his decision to drop out of school. That was several years ago. Beta had acted violently in a moment of impulse. Out of desperation, his mother had to send him to a mental hospital. That experience was like a storm that completely disrupted Beta's original life trajectory. Both mother and son found it hard to let go of this past. What was once a cheerful dinner gathering turned tense. In the end, everyone left unhappily. Watching his brother's departing figure, Mark immediately ran after him and apologized to Beta on behalf of their mother. Beta said nothing and simply told Mark to get in the car. Then the car started and they drove toward Angel Cemetery. In this tranquil place, there was an old workshop left by their father. The two climbed up to the rooftop. When they first arrived at the rooftop, Mark looked down at the height beneath him and felt a wave of fear rise in his heart. At this moment, Beta spoke up. "Our family has been skilled craftsmen for generations. The ability to handle heights is ingrained in our DNA. Moreover, Mark, you have already signed your name in the Chronicle. This means you have accepted the legacy of our ancestors." After saying this, he encouraged his brother to stand up boldly. Mark gathered the courage to follow his brother's advice and did so. To his surprise, after slowly standing upright, he realized he had truly overcome his fear of heights. Then the two climbed through the rooftop entrance into the attic. Once inside the attic, Beta wanted to look for their father's hammer. As he searched, he introduced to Mark that this was once a magical place created by their ancestors. And as he spoke, he handed Mark a delicate wooden box. Curious, Mark picked up the wooden box and examined it closely. At this moment, a nail suddenly sprang out from the box, stabbing the unsuspecting Mark. Immediately after, with a crack, a square hole appeared in the floor. To Beta's surprise, the legendary treasure he had been searching for years, the hammer, appeared before his eyes. It turned out that Mark's blood had activated this magical hammer. In the next moment, the hammer seemed to come alive and burrowed straight into Mark's palm. Seeing this, Beta quickly explained to Mark that this hammer was an important weapon against the Griffin. Their father had also told stories about the Griffin. This creature was born from hatred and dreamed of ruling every world it could enter. Although the Griffin couldn't enter the human world, it could use magic to control anything in the human realm. And that terrifying creature needed Mark's family's blood to survive. Beta wanted Mark to kill the Griffin, but his brother lacked the courage. At this moment, a shadow flashed outside. The two wanted to leave the place, but on their way back they were suddenly blocked by a huge statue. The eerie statue transformed into the figure of the Grim Reaper, wielding a scythe and wildly swinging it at them. Even stranger, another angel statue jumped down, trapping them in between. The brothers rushed into the old workshop. They thought they were in great danger, but to their surprise, in the next second, the two statues began to fight each other fiercely. Just last night, the brothers had narrowly escaped the statues' violent attacks. But when Mark woke up, he was terrified to find that his brother Beta was missing. He hurried out of the old workshop and was shocked by the scene before him. The ground was littered with debris, as if telling the tale of last night's thrilling events. This chaotic scene made Mark realize that everything that happened last night wasn't a dream, and the angel statue that had been missing had now quietly returned to its place. Although Mark had no idea what had happened, he instinctively expressed his gratitude to the angel. Then he rushed anxiously to the store, hoping to find out Beta's whereabouts. However, there was no sign of Beta in the empty store. At this moment, a strange whispering sound reached Mark's ears. To his surprise, the voice was actually coming from the ancient book. In a panic, Mark hurriedly closed the book. He still doubted that all of this was just an illusion. It must be the series of bizarre events that caused him to experience auditory hallucinations. But the ancient book seemed to have a life of its own and continued to say that Beta had already entered the Black Tower. Panicking, Mark threw the book into the safe. He then sought out the psychologist Loff and explained the situation to her. After listening, she advised him to find Beta as soon as possible. Perhaps that would solve all his problems. However, Mark was completely unaware that this seemingly ordinary advice actually concealed a huge conspiracy by Loff. Just as Mark was leaving, he happened to run into Lisa at the door. To make it more awkward, she turned out to be Loff's daughter. Given her understanding of Mark, Loff warned Lisa to keep her distance from him. But as soon as she turned around, Lisa ran to the library to look up news reports from 10 years ago. It turned out that Mark's anxiety stemmed from the death of his father by suicide. On the night of his 6th birthday, his father drove the brothers to Angel Cemetery. As soon as they opened the workshop door, their mother rushed in with the police. She reported her husband for mental illness and kidnapping her son. Then their father vanished in a burst of flames. After learning the truth, Lisa felt an indescribable compassion for Mark. On the other side, Mark opened the Chronicle again in search of his brother. Inside, he found a map that detailed the geography of the Black Tower. As Mark was searching for clues about his brother, a strange-looking bug suddenly appeared. When he came to his senses, he found himself once again in the Black Tower. Just as Mark was filled with confusion, a figure suddenly pounced on him. He focused and realized it was Beta. At this moment, Mark truly believed that the Black Tower wasn't an illusion. Then Beta introduced the structure of the Black Tower to Mark and stated that he had come here to kill the Griffin. The two brothers finally reunited after a long time, but Beta had no intention of returning to the real world because in reality he was nothing but a despised crazy person. In the Black Tower, he would overthrow the Griffin's rule and become a hero who would save the world. He planned to send Mark back to the real world through the church's portal the next day. But to Beta's shock, Mark had already been to the Black Tower twice and had never used the portal. He then realized that his brother was the most powerful traveler in the family. The next day, as Mark just woke up, Beta suddenly covered his mouth and signaled him to be quiet and look to the right. It turned out that the monsters in the Black Tower had discovered them. The two dared not make a sound and quickly fled while the monsters were distracted. A horde of monsters chased after them. Meanwhile, on the other side of the real world, after learning about Mark's situation, Lisa rushed to the record store but couldn't see Mark's figure. Only Beta's friend Megan was there, helping to run the business. At this moment, the brothers were being pursued by the monsters. In a critical moment, Beta's feet were ensnared by a monster. He shouted for his brother to escape quickly. With no other choice, Mark turned and fled. He hid behind a tree and picked up a stone from the ground, silently praying to return to the real world. When he cautiously opened his eyes, he was horrified to find a monster right in front of him. In a panic, he threw the stone with all his might. To his surprise, it hit Lisa instead. And just like that, Mark crossed back into the real world, still holding onto a stone tightly in his hand. Megan came running after hearing the noise and looked at Mark, who had appeared out of nowhere, with confusion. She questioned him about what was going on. Under their pressing questions, Mark had to reveal the truth about the Black Tower. Megan's face was full of suspicion. Believing that the Black Tower adventures Mark mentioned didn't exist in order to prove that he was telling the truth, Mark took them to the old workshop in search of evidence. They climbed up to the attic and peeked through the gaps. Mark was shocked to find that the spacious attic from last night had now turned into a cramped storage room. Lisa turned away in disappointment. She and Megan urged Mark to continue his therapy. Seeing the skepticism on their faces, Mark's emotions spiraled out of control. In the end, the three parted ways unhappily. In a fit of rage, Mark punched a nearby statue. Unbeknownst to him, as he threw the punch, the Black Tower world shook violently in response. It was as if it echoed his inner anger. The slave hunters in the Black Tower were not afraid. Instead, they seemed unusually excited. Mark returned home feeling depressed. As soon as he entered, his mother called out to him. She looked worried and asked about Beta's whereabouts. Mark could only pretend to be calm and lied that his brother had gone out of town for supplies, and falsely claimed that his brother went to another city to purchase goods. But Mark knew that this wasn't a long-term solution. So in the dead of night, Mark hurried to seek Megan's help again. Megan was Beta's most trusted friend. In this situation, she might be able to assist. As Mark's ability to travel was fluctuating, they decided to follow Beta's hints to search for the mysterious portal. Following clues from an ancient book, the two finally found a dilapidated church and discovered a hidden chamber behind a stone sculpture. They walked down the stairs to the bottom and finally saw the mysterious pattern recorded in the book on the wall. Then they pressed the code according to the book's instructions. The stone door slowly opened. Megan was stunned by the sight before her. Before he could react, she stepped through the portal. Immediately after, everything in front of her became blurry. He took off his glasses only to find that her vision had recovered. Even more astonishing was that the leg that had been painful due to an injury could now move freely without pain. The two were immersed in their surprise when the portal behind them quietly closed. They rushed over and desperately pulled, but the portal wouldn't budge. Megan immediately panicked, his voice trembling as she anxiously asked Mark how they could get back. Mark closed his eyes and concentrated. In the next moment, his figure vanished instantly, leaving Megan standing there in shock. The roars of monsters echoed all around him. Megan shouted desperately, but there was no response in the empty space. Mark opened his eyes again and found himself back at home. He remembered that Megan was still trapped in the Black Tower. Mark opened the ancient book trying to return to rescue him. But just then, his mother Pet suddenly appeared. Seeing the old book of her late husband, her expression darkened instantly. She angrily locked Mark inside the house. Mark's inner fury could no longer be contained. He pounded frantically on the door. Meanwhile, in the mysterious Black Tower, the world began to shake violently in response to Mark's anger. The wall sealed with griffins was overwhelmed and collapsed. Soon, a massive opening appeared. The Monster King slowly walked into the hole, muttering incomprehensible words under his breath. At the same time, Pet called a psychologist and stated that Mark's emotions had completely spiraled out of control. She had to lock her son inside. However, the doctor gave an unexpected suggestion, that is, to let Mark go outside. It wasn't until the next day that Pet opened the door. As soon as the door opened, Mark dashed towards the church. He quickly opened the portal to the Black Tower. But inside, there was no sign of Megan. He only found a wooden plaque inside. Mark hurriedly grabbed the plaque and ran out. He saw a message from Megan saying he hadn't gone far. To safely rescue Megan, Mark didn't act recklessly. First, he returned to the store to gather and prepare all the supplies he could use. Then he detailed the method to enter the Black Tower. Once prepared, Mark went to find Lisa first. He sincerely apologized for the conflict from yesterday. The two reconciled successfully. Then Mark handed Lisa the note he had written along with the mysterious chronicle. He said that if he couldn't rescue Megan, he hoped Lisa could give these to his mother Pet. When the next day came, Lisa would take Pet to open the portal. After doing all this, Mark stepped back into the Black Tower. At this time, Megan was nowhere to be found. Mark instinctively climbed upwards. At this moment, he finally saw the full view of the mine level. Mark placed a speaker on the slope and played a familiar song, hoping to attract Megan's attention with it. However, the song didn't bring Megan, but it first attracted the attention of the slave hunters nearby. Led by Fendi, the slave hunters had been searching for suitable humans to offer to the Monster King. They began a ruthless hunt for any humans that appeared in the Black Tower. Upon hearing the song, several slave hunters rushed toward the sound. Mark, hiding in a concealed spot, was observing the surroundings with binoculars. He quickly spotted the figures of the hunters, but before he could react, the slave hunters detected his presence. A large group of hunters chased after Mark. Terrified, he ran deep into the forest. Just when he felt despair, a strange, mysterious figure suddenly appeared. The figure quickly smeared fish entrails on Mark. With this, they narrowly escaped danger. Mark focused his gaze and realized the mysterious figure in front of him was Megan. Through conversation, Mark learned that there were also humans living here, but they were being captured and enslaved by the slave hunters. Moreover, one day in the outside world equated to 3 weeks inside the Black Tower. Since Mark told Lisa that she would bring their mother to open the portal tomorrow, he and Megan needed to stay in the Black Tower for 3 weeks. Lisa was filled with curiosity about Mark's actions. She opened the mysterious ancient book. To verify whether what Mark said was true, she decided to conduct an experiment based on the methods recorded in the book. The book stated that if you dripped water on a plant specimen, biting insects would crawl out. Moreover, the more water there was, the larger the insects would grow. But there was no need to worry, because these insects were afraid of salt. She could be eliminated by sprinkling salt. Lisa carefully dripped water on the dried flower specimen. However, nothing happened. Her friends thought she was crazy, but Lisa remained unconvinced. She decided to visit the church described in the ancient book to investigate. As she was about to leave, her friend Kelly placed the flower into a cup of water. The three then followed the book's records to the church and found the underground chamber. But when they pressed the code, water flowed out from the nearby stone pillar. After discussing, Mark and Megan decided to spend the day guarding the portal first. If Lisa didn't appear, it would prove that there was indeed a time difference between the two worlds. At this moment, a sudden cry from humans came from nearby. The two looked in the direction of the sound and discovered a slave convoy of griffins. The monsters were forcing humans to transport basalt rocks. No one knew where these people were being taken. When they saw Beta in the convoy, Megan wanted to save him, but revealed their position. Seeing the slave hunters about to catch up, the two had to run away desperately. After a tense and thrilling chase, they were cornered near the edge of a cliff. In a critical moment, Mark remembered what his father had once said. He decisively grabbed Megan and jumped off the cliff. Then, he focused his thoughts on returning to the real world. Miraculously, the two landed in Mark's bedroom. Just as Lisa and the others were leaving the church, they were caught by the police right outside. At this moment, Mark was trying to contact Lisa to let her know that he had found Megan, but she wasn't home. Meanwhile, the flower specimen on the table had already absorbed plenty of water. A terrifying monster was about to be born. The next day, Mark and Megan decided to return to the Black Tower to rescue Beta, who was enslaved. However, they were unaware that a greater crisis was approaching. The Griffin, upon learning of Mark and Megan's escape, killed the leader of the hunters. He chose a new successor. Meanwhile, Lisa returned home, feeling helpless in front of the ancient book. Suddenly, a scream pierced the silence. She was shocked to discover that the flower specimen had bloomed. The petals were covered in a strange slimy substance. Then a knock on the door sounded. Lisa's father arrived and sternly warned her not to enter any places without permission, especially the church. He demanded that she cut off all contact with Mark. Since she had not found evidence of the Black Tower's existence, Lisa handed the ancient book over to her father. To calm her nerves, she played the tape Mark had given her. However, in the next moment, a tingling sensation spread throughout her body. Before she could react, a bug crawled into Lisa's mouth, nearly choking her. In the chaos, she rushed into the kitchen, grabbed a metal clip, and suppressed her nausea, pulling out the bug. After throwing it into the trash can, she quickly grabbed some salt and poured it in. Soon, the crashing sounds from the trash can ceased. The bug instantly turned into a wisp of smoke. Lisa finally believed that what Mark said was true, so she decided to go to her father to retrieve the ancient book to give to Pet, in order to prove the existence of the Black Tower. After studying the ancient book, Loft found Pet and suggested that she take immediate action. At this moment, Mark and Megan, returning from the Black Tower, had already devised a detailed plan to rescue Beta. However, when Mark was about to head to the Black Tower, his mother blocked his way. Just then, a van drove up. Several people in white coats stepped out. These were the psychiatrists who had taken Beta away years ago. Mark realized that his mother intended to send him to the mental hospital as well. To rescue Beta, Mark engaged in a fierce struggle with the doctors. At the moment he was about to be sedated, he punched down the doctor holding the syringe and quickly climbed onto the roof and escaped. Mark met up with Megan at the church without incident. Thinking they had finally escaped danger, they never thought the doctors would come after her again and preemptively control Megan. At the critical moment when Mark was about to be sedated, a familiar figure appeared. He kicked the doctor away and easily dealt with the other two. Mark and Megan seized the opportunity to escape into the secret chamber. They didn't see who had rescued them until the secret door closed. As the mysterious figure left, Pet, sitting in the car, happened to see him. When the mysterious figure took off his hat, Pet realized that this person was her son, Mark. But hadn't he entered the Black Tower? Pet shouted loudly, but he ran away without looking back. Pet walked into the church and saw the bodies strewn everywhere. Now the misunderstanding was serious. At this moment, Mark was unaware that he had become the scapegoat. Upon hearing the news of Mark's alleged murder, Loff immediately grounded Lisa and promptly rushed to the scene to assist in the investigation. As he stepped into the church, he saw the doctor lying in a pool of blood. It turned out that the sheriff had called Loff to confirm whether Mark was aggressive. Surprisingly, he was quite certain that Mark would do such a thing, but as a psychologist, he shouldn't have jumped to conclusions so easily, so why would he lie? Meanwhile, in the Black Tower, Mark and Megan had been walking for a long time. As the sky darkened, Megan decided to rest at the foot of the mountain. As they were setting up the tent, a drop of water quietly fell. Megan stood up in terror. Then it started to rain heavily from the sky. The once dry flowers instantly bloomed all over the ground. Thousands of bugs crawled out from the blossoms. The two climbed onto the rocks to escape. Strangely, the bugs seemed to fear the rocks and inexplicably stopped their pursuit. The next morning, Mark and Megan woke up. They found that the water-deprived bugs had turned into remains. The two continued on their journey. Greater challenges awaited them ahead. After a long trek, they finally reached the water source. Who would have thought that such a beautiful paradise was hidden in this barren desert? Lisa successfully found the ancient book and hurriedly called her friends to drive to the library. Not long after she left, Loff returned home. However, he didn't enter the house. Instead, he walked straight to the backyard, lit a brazier with gasoline, and then took off his coat, revealing a hooded sweatshirt stained with blood. This was the very clothing Mark had worn when he attacked the doctor. Why was it on Loff's body? What was Loff's true identity? Meanwhile, a faceless illusionist arrived at the sacred site of the Black Tower, holding a glass jar. The demon at the door was just about to stop him, but he transformed into a leaf and floated inside. This illusionist belonged to the magical race of the Black Tower. Not only could he become invisible and had a peculiar appearance, but even more incredibly, he could transform into any human form at will, and could even control the human brain with his thoughts. He was known as the Faceless One. The leader of the slave hunters noticed something unusual. He quickly smeared black goo on his nose. The Faceless One instantly appeared and respectfully reported to the Griffin that the spy in the human world had sent news. The mission to frame Mark had been accomplished. To aid in finding Mark's whereabouts, he presented a mysterious artifact. Mark and Megan arrived at Megan's lakeside cabin. At this moment, they were completely unaware that this hidden cabin was about to be exposed. The two were busy setting up traps to guard against a slave hunter ambush. As night fell, they were chatting by the lake. After a brief rest, a mosquito quietly landed on Mark's ear. It bit him and then flew away. Surprisingly, the mosquito flew into the hands of the Faceless One. He licked the blood off his finger and reported Mark's location and rescue plan to the Griffin. It turned out that the Faceless One could obtain all information with just a drop of blood. The Griffin ordered secret surveillance on Mark. The next day, Mark woke up to find his backpack empty. The two assumed it was the work of animals and didn't think much of it. As night fell again, the slave hunters still didn't appear. Mark took this opportunity to study the technique of random teleportation. After numerous attempts, he finally found a clue. A traveler needed no external objects. Clearing the mind was enough for instant movement. However, one could only jump between two worlds and couldn't teleport within the same world. Mark began practicing to quickly master the teleportation technique. A courier found Dr. Loff to relay the Griffin's orders. It turned out that Loff was the undercover spy. The other party clearly told him not to let humans learn any secrets about the Black Tower. He then went to check his daughter's room and found that Lisa wasn't there. Loff hurriedly brought a vacuum cleaner and began to gulp down hair from the trash. As he chewed, he saw Lisa's experiences. Worried that she would disrupt the Griffin's plans, Loff had to rush into the car to find his daughter. In his frustration, he suddenly revealed his true form. It turned out that Loff was also a Faceless One. That same morning, Lisa found Pet and explained the existence of the Black Tower to her. She also presented a large amount of evidence to her and the sheriff. Upon seeing the evidence, Pet still didn't believe her. Just as Lisa was about to produce handwriting proof, she realized the ancient book was missing. Lisa then remembered that the ancient book was left in Kelly's car. She had to go find Kelly again. The sheriff and Pet accompanied her as well. They were completely unaware that a great disaster was about to befall the Black Tower. Meanwhile, Megan and Mark were unaware of the impending crisis and were focused on training Mark's teleportation abilities. Fortunately, with Megan's reminder, Mark successfully mastered the teleportation technique. Lisa finally found the ancient book. However, when she got it, she found the book had been soaked in beer. Moreover, the dried flowers in the book had bloomed. The bugs were long gone. A sense of foreboding suddenly washed over her. She hurriedly grabbed a packet of salt and began to follow the slime on the ground. But tragedy struck too fast. A female classmate had become the monster's snack. Lisa rushed to find help but encountered her father, who had come to cause trouble. The faceless one used mind control and Lisa was instantly subdued. Meanwhile, the lively party turned into a slaughterhouse for the bugs. Everyone scattered in panic. The sheriff was shocked by the scene before him. A monster bug taller than a human was gnawing. The sheriff immediately drew his gun and shot. However, it had no effect at all. The monster spun around and knocked the sheriff to the ground. At a critical moment, Pet picked up a handgun and shot directly at the monster's head. This barely managed to kill the monster. Just then, Dr. Loff arrived. With just a glance, the bugs on the ground transformed into a grizzly bear. In the Black Tower, Mark and Megan fell into a tired sleep. Suddenly, a noise from outside startled Mark awake. He alertly got up and went outside to check. To his surprise, he saw the figure of his father. However, Mark knew that the person before him wasn't his father. A strong sense of unease surged within him. He hurried back to the cabin and grasped a thumbtack tightly in his palm. He tried to calm himself down. Mark had been troubled by symptoms of irritability and could only regain calmness with the help of the stabbing pain of a pushpin. Since the slave hunters had not appeared, his emotions became increasingly unstable. Megan noticed Mark's unusual behavior. After hesitating for a moment, he walked to where the tacks were kept and threw all the tacks into the water. Megan and Beta were close friends. They knew everything about their family. Naturally, they understood the root of Mark's illness. Years ago, Mark's father had taken the two brothers to the workshop. He planned to destroy all research related to the Griffin to prevent anyone from finding the entrance to the Black Tower. His father and brother urged Mark to keep the Chronicle safe in the car. Mark, frightened to get out, called his brother back. Since then, he always felt that if he hadn't held his brother back, he could have gone to help their father. That way, their father wouldn't have met with an accident and died. This guilt had weighed on him for years. But at this moment, Megan leaned close to Mark and coldly said, "Your father's death is all your fault." These words were like a dagger, instantly enraging Mark. He swung his fist at Megan, then he launched a violent attack against him. Meanwhile, the Griffin's castle began to shake violently. A beam of sunlight shone onto his throne. The Griffin keenly sensed Mark's emotional turmoil and immediately ordered the slave hunters to mobilize, ensuring they captured Mark. At this moment, Megan returned from chopping wood. She saw Mark pummeling someone. As he got closer, he realized he was hitting himself. Just as Megan reached out, the self on the ground instantly vanished into a pile of sand. At this moment, a trail of footprints appeared on the beach. Megan reacted quickly and grabbed a stick to throw it, knocking the mysterious person unconscious. The two quickly tied him up and began to interrogate his identity. This mysterious figure was the Faceless One. To escape, he kept changing his form. At one moment, he transformed into Megan's father, then into Mark's father. He even turned invisible. Seeing his stubbornness, Mark lit a fire right beneath him. Under severe torture, the Faceless One finally surrendered and confessed everything. Only then did Mark learn that the Griffin fed on his hatred. As long as they fought the Griffin, it would become even more powerful. Mark realized that their whereabouts had been exposed, and the slave hunters were approaching them. The two had to evacuate immediately. At a critical moment, Mark unexpectedly showed mercy and let the Faceless One go. The biting monster was misidentified by the police as a bear that had escaped from the zoo. The case was hastily closed. But at this moment, the sheriff found Mark's mother and mentioned a strange incident from years ago. Mark's father's body disappeared after he was burned to death. The prosecutor at the time had forged the ashes. The sheriff was about to intervene, but the prosecutor suddenly transformed into a faceless person. In fear, the sheriff immediately drew his gun, but was arrested as a madman. The case was thus closed. But if what was shot today wasn't a bear but a real monster, then everything Mark said would make complete sense. Lisa had said that to open the portal, Pet must be present with the Chronicle. Meanwhile, when the slave hunters arrived at the cabin in the Black Tower, Mark and Megan had long since vanished. They had to return to the mine first. Mark and Megan were quietly following behind them. Fortunately, the two successfully found the mine. However, All of this was part of the Griffin's plan. The mine owner Sarn had received news long ago and knew that Mark would follow the hunters. They just needed to wait. Mark and Megan discovered that there were many people in the mine, and they couldn't tell which one was Beta, so they came up with a brilliant plan to play music using a tape recorder. When Beta heard the music, he instantly realized that his brother had come to rescue him. He was about to raise his hand to signal, but he was knocked unconscious by a slave hunter and dragged into the mine. Since they had already confirmed the brother's location, Mark decided to wait until dark to take action. Because the ancient book mentioned that slave hunters had poor vision at night, soon night fell. Mark first teleported to the human world and then jumped to the mine. Meanwhile, Megan attracted the hunters' attention outside, so this was a plan for the two to attract attention. The rescue plan thus unfolded smoothly. Mark finally saw his bound brother, but unexpectedly, as soon as he untied the ropes, he was locked inside by an iron door. Mark realized he had fallen into a trap. He grasped his brother Beta's hand, preparing to use his teleportation ability to escape the danger. But unexpectedly, his ability suddenly failed. Beta sniffed the stain on his hand and recognized it as a type of special tar. It would suppress the teleportation abilities of travelers. Seizing the opportunity, Beta explained to his brother that the Griffin coveted his teleportation ability to invade the human world, and the hammer was the key to opening the portal from the Black Tower. Fortunately, Beta had hidden the hammer in advance. Interestingly, the hammer seemed to have a spirit in Mark's hands, guiding him to break through the stone wall and successfully carve out a hole. Mark escaped the mine with his brother. At this moment, Megan's weak voice came through, warning them to be careful behind them. Mark quickly threw the hammer, instantly eliminating the pursuing slave hunters. But Megan collapsed to the ground due to severe exhaustion. Since the teleportation ability had failed, they could only take Megan back to the portal, hoping someone could open the door. The slave leader reported their escape to the Griffin, which infuriated the Griffin. It abandoned its puppet control and revealed its true form. At this moment, Beta was desperately driving the carriage. He finally arrived at the portal before dawn. However, at this critical moment, the two brothers erupted into a fierce conflict over the ownership of the hammer. Beta knocked Mark unconscious in an attempt to open the door himself, but he couldn't use the hammer to release energy like Mark could. Just then, a sound of tearing air echoed through the space. The Griffin threw the puppet to the ground. Then Mark's brain felt dizzy, and he collapsed to the ground. When he woke from the dizziness, he found the surroundings shrouded in thick fog. Megan and Beta were nowhere to be seen. He anxiously searched around and finally saw Beta ahead, but behind him was the Griffin's deadly massive claw. Beta threw the hammer to the ground. Mark hurriedly picked it up and held it tightly in his hand. The sheriff and Pet rushed to Dr. Loft's house to investigate the injury caused by a grizzly bear and took Lisa and the ancient book away. At this point, Lisa had forgotten everything that had happened before. Loft lied that she fainted and lost her memory at the party. Then Loft turned on the TV, which was reporting on a circus bear's escape that had crashed into a party and attacked the crowd. Although Pet didn't remember the specific details of the party, he vaguely felt that this matter was related to the Griffin. Loft forbade Lisa from going out and also prohibited her from touching the Chronicle again. Fortunately, the sheriff and Pet arrived in time and forcibly took Lisa away despite Loft's objections. The three then arrived at the portal. Lisa attempted to open the door using the last password, but the result was the same as before, only a spring of water flowed out. At this moment, Pet suddenly thought that when Mark was a child, he believed all planets revolved around the moon, so the last password shouldn't be the sun. Sure enough, they successfully opened the portal. Meanwhile, the Griffin was holding the injured Beta, constantly threatening his life to provoke Mark. Angry Mark was about to fight back. Suddenly, his father's warning flashed in his mind. Don't let hatred consume you, because the Griffin lived off hatred. Only by letting go of hatred could he defeat it and rescue Beta. Mark suppressed his anger and released the hammer from his grip. He turned and walked into the fog, finding the weakened Megan. At this moment, Pet and the others opened the portal. Mark and Megan appeared before everyone. The Griffin followed closely behind. Lisa rushed over to take Megan away. Mark summoned the hammer and struck the Griffin's arm. Beta was able to escape and fell to the ground. Mark hurriedly helped his brother up and returned to the church. As everyone prepared to leave, the Griffin attacked again. At a critical moment, Pet closed the portal. Everyone finally managed to escape with their lives. However, the people of the Black Tower didn't give up easily. The courier bill responsible for contacting Loft suddenly transformed into the form of an illusionist. It turned out he was the prosecutor from years ago. Bill spat out an egg from his mouth, from which a monster emerged. It killed Loff and took his place. These two would continue to lurk in the human world, stopping at nothing to send Mark back to the Black Tower. Mark thought his life was about to return to normal, but trouble kept coming. Kelly still retained the memories of the party. He was unwilling to accept that his friend had been harmed by a monster, so he quietly stole the Chronicle and carried his friend into the Black Tower. Thus, the story of the fantasy series The Griffin came to an end. Yet the mysterious world of the Griffin remained shrouded in thick fog. Although Mark had temporarily repelled the Griffin, he often woke in the middle of the night from an inexplicable sense of panic. It felt as if invisible eyes were still watching his every move from the shadows. And that chronicle, filled with secrets, after experiencing many twists and turns, faintly emitted a strange glimmer of light. It seemed to foreshadow that a new crisis was about to unfold. How would Mark respond to this unknown danger? What astonishing secrets await to be uncovered in the Griffin's world? If you enjoy my channel, please click subscribe